Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. Tonight, we stray farther from the map into places not named, only remembered. Where fog shatters like glass, trees lean closer when you blink, and buried things whisper their own return. A path that forgets your footprints, a school bell that never needed a hand to ring, a tent that shouldn't be there and yet is. If your memory holds shadows that weren't yours, or if silence ever felt too still, go ahead and subscribe, like, and share this with someone who's woken up one step closer to something wrong. Now hush the world and step into what never left. It was early November, bitter cold. When I saw it, the kind of cold that doesn't just bite, but hangs in your hair, your breath, your bones. My name's Tyler Crane. I'm 33, work freelance video projects out of Charleston, and I came out to Boone County chasing drone footage of untouched forest. The leaf fall was nearly complete, just bare claw branches now. Threading sky, and a friend tipped me off about a side trail that hadn't been mapped since the late 90s. I wanted texture for a short film brush, light angles, some narrative voiceover about forgotten ground. But I got more than I wanted. The trail wasn't marked in any way I recognized, just a narrow dip in the hillside, as if the land had once been worn down by feet that no longer walk. I stepped off the ranger-cleared path around 10 a.m., adjusting the GoPro on my chest. Almost instantly, the air shifted. I don't mean weather, I mean pressure. Like walking into a room someone just left after an argument. The trees along this offshoot path were tall and silent, and the earth felt soft but oddly uniform, like velvet layered over something hollow. I remember the first strange thing. About 20 minutes in, I noticed the trail ahead bore no footprints, none. But what it did have were these deep indentations, not quite boot-shaped, not paw prints, either. More like someone or several someones had pressed shin-deep into the dirt, leaving behind perfect vertical impressions, as if walking without feet. Just wait. They weren't scattered or chaotic either. They were spaced apart like a careful, even stride. Too far apart for children, too heavy for deer. I stopped to check behind me. Nothing. My boots, which I knew should have left tread in the soft dirt, had left no trace at all. I took out my phone, switched to rear camera, and recorded myself walking back and forth a few steps. Watched it immediately. The trees were there. My movements were there, but the ground didn't change. No movement, no sinking. It looked like I was ghosting over the trail. I checked again, knelt down, even where I should have crushed leaves. Everything lay smooth as untouched snow. I should have turned back right then. I didn't. Curiosity's a hell of a drug when you think you're documenting something new. I told myself the ground was compacted. I told myself the camera must have had a focus issue. Then I saw the next formation up ahead, about 40 feet from where I stood. The trail rose slightly uphill, and there, stretched in a perfect line, were more of those indentations. But now they were deeper, more deliberate, and they were fresh. The edges hadn't collapsed. And in this damp air, that meant they were recent. They curved slightly to the left, as if whoever or whatever had made them was avoiding something. I stepped around a sycamore stump and felt the hairs on my arms rise. The woods went quiet, not the usual hush, but a dead silence. No birds, no leaves shifting. Even the usual drone of far-off wind had faded. I checked my phone, no signal. But that wasn't unusual. What was strange was how muffled my own movements were. like my coat rustling and my breath weren't quite echoing off the trees anymore, just dissolving. 10 more minutes, and the trail began to narrow again. I'd lost track of time. The GPS wasn't loading, but I had a general sense of direction. Then I saw something hanging from a branch, about 5 feet off the ground, a strip of red nylon cord, tied in a single knot, frayed at the ends, nothing around it. I didn't bring it. I didn't touch it. It wasn't old. Either no signs of rot, no discoloration, just there, like a marker only meant to be seen once. Then came the moment that changed it. I turned around, fully intending to leave, and there were no trees behind me. Not blank space, just too many trees. The trail was gone, not obscured, gone. The curvature, the slope I'd just walked, none of it matched. I scanned for landmarks. I remembered a forked tree, a stone with a rusted bolt through it. Nothing. And here's the part I can't explain. I looked down at my feet, and the ground beneath me was perfectly level, flat. But I'd been climbing a hill for 20 minutes. I started walking back the direction I thought I came from. Every step felt like it dragged slightly, like the earth was suctioning my boots, and still no tracks. I started talking out loud, partly to document, partly to stay sane. This is Tyler Crane. November 3rd. I am hiking east of Big Ugly Wildlife Area. I appear to be experiencing, my voice broke. I'd heard something. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't even a rustle. It was a sound like a breath taken in, but stretched out over several seconds. Not from me. Then I saw them. 2 new indentations in the dirt, about 10 feet ahead, not side by side in line with mine. Same depth, same spacing. As if I was following something that was waiting for me to catch up. I took 1 step forward and stopped. The indentations weren't just ahead of me, they were fresh. Loose soil at the rim, darkened with moisture, like the weight had pressed in only moments before I arrived. I crouched beside them and studied the edges. They weren't boot-shaped. And yet, the weight distribution was too precise to be random. Flat-bottomed, like someone walked with perfectly square, heavy stumps. I thought of prosthetics, but there were no scuff marks, no signs of support. Just impossible. Deliberate compressions in the earth, heading deeper uphill. I turned back again, convinced I had missed some obvious turnoff. But all I saw was more forest. Same trees, same ground. No trail, no fork, not even a slope anymore, just flat. Endless terrain. I pulled out my drone remote, hoping I could launch upward and get bearings. But the controller wouldn't pair. Battery at 93%. Yet the screen flickered, as if draining power by the second. I gave up on electronics and started marking trees with the edge of my tripod, just simple slashes in the bark. A habit from an old camping mentor. But when I passed one of the trees I'd slashed 5 minutes earlier, the bark was unbroken. Nothing there, just smooth gray skin, as if it had never been touched. I felt myself slipping, not physically, but something in my chest, like my heart had started floating out of sync. I tried to talk aloud again, narrating for my own clarity, but my voice sounded hollow, distant, as if it bounced once inside me and never left my throat. I paused, took slow breaths, counted, 5 in, 5 out. I thought about my apartment back in Charleston, the hum of the fridge, the dull warmth of radiators. But it all felt paper thin, like I was remembering someone else's life. That's when the wind changed. It didn't blow across my face, it pulled at my back. Gentle but directional, as if urging me forward, The air had a sour hint now, something metallic and damp, like rusted iron soaked in leaf rot. I pressed on not out of bravery, but because going backward no longer felt possible. The indentations continued up the trail, looping gently through a hollow where the trees grew tight. I counted 15 sets before they began to change. They got narrower, closer together, as if whatever made them was adjusting its stride. Then I saw the broken compass. It lay half buried at the base of a pine, its face cracked, needle spinning in slow, lazy circles. I didn't own a compass like that old school, brass cased. I left it where it was. A few yards further, I found a torn piece of paper pinned under a stone. No words. Just 3 small circles drawn in charcoal, each filled solid, aligned in a triangle. I know it sounds meaningless, but I stared at that symbol longer than I should have. It felt familiar, like something I'd seen in a dream or the corner of a childhood book. I didn't take it. I left everything untouched. But my boots felt heavier after that. The last thing I remember clearly was the ridge. The trail leveled out and opened into a small clearing oval, about the size of a backyard. At the center was a bare patch of ground. No grass, no leaves, just packed earth. And in the center of that, a single vertical impression, deeper than all the others, at least 3 feet down. I approached it slowly, chest tight. I had the sickening thought that if I looked into it, something would look back. But I did anyway. There was nothing at first, just shadow. Then I heard my name. It wasn't loud. It wasn't whispered. It was present, like a thought placed into my skull. Just Tyler. No emotion, no accent, just the sound of me being known. I recoiled, stumbled backward, tripped over a root. And when I looked up again, the indentations were gone. All of them. The clearing was smooth, the trail vanished. Trees now pressed in on every side, and behind me, where I swore the path had led up, was only a steep drop-off into the hollow. No exit. I ran, not on a trail, just through brush, thorns, anything. I don't remember how long. But eventually the trees grew thinner. The air returned. The sounds of birds and bugs crept back in. I hit a paved service road sometime around the dusk. My clothes were shredded. My camera was gone. My voice hoarse. I flagged down a trucker who didn't ask many questions and drove me back toward the highway. The next day, I returned with rangers. We never found the trail again. "Don't bother bringing speakers," Jeff had said. "The place is quiet enough to hear your heartbeat." I thought he was exaggerating. We were 3 couples, heading up for a 4-day weekend in late October prime leaf turn season. And Jeff's uncle had a rental cabin so remote it didn't even show up on Google Maps. I'm Kayla, 29 lab tech by trade. And I'd agreed mostly because it sounded like the kind of off-grid reset I needed, the kind where the night swallows your phone signal and you can finally feel your own bones again. The drive-in was steep and slow, a winding gravel tongue that lost cell service an hour before we reached the cabin. Okonalufti River glittered between the trees as we passed sullen and high after recent rains. The cabin was old but perfectly intact. Real timber, wide front porch, one of those stone chimneys that looks built to withstand a war. No power grid, just propane lamps and a generator we were told to use sparingly, but clean, so clean it almost unsettled me. The windows looked newly washed, floors scrubbed, Even the ironwood stove shined like it had been polished yesterday. We unpacked and set up sleeping bags in the loft. Jeff and Claire took the main bedroom. Theo and Megan grabbed the downstairs bunks. And Evan and I got the upper loft. By nightfall, we had a fire going and canned chili simmering. It was only later that we noticed the silence. Not just outdoors, that part we expected, but inside. There were no house creaks, no wind against the window panes, no fire crackle. When I brought it up, no one said much. We all sort of brushed it off. But that night, when Evan turned in his sleep and the mattress didn't squeak, I started paying attention. You could talk. Of course. You could feel your voice. Your throat moved. Your lips formed the shape. The words came out, but nothing echoed. Nothing bounced. It was like our voices were absorbed into the wood itself. It wasn't muffled. It was erased. Theo tried whistling. I clapped my hands. We all tested it, one by one. Same result. Like our sound stopped existing 1 inch from our skin. I felt my stomach twist, like we were sealed inside some kind of vacuum. Claire got nervous first. "It's just acoustics," Jeff said, though he didn't sound convinced. He knocked on the wooden wall next to the fireplace. No sound, not even a thud. He picked up a spoon and let it drop onto the metal stove. It hit, but we heard nothing. I watched his brows crease. That was when Megan started filming on her phone. She panned the room, narrated in a cheerful tone, tried to capture our little soundless experiment. But when she played it back, there was nothing, just a silent video of us all miming reactions, like we were trapped inside a silent film. We should have left then. But we stayed. Told ourselves it was something strange, but not dangerous. Told ourselves it was just how the place was built. The next day, we hiked down toward the river. Outside, everything was normal. Wind, leaves, birds, the soft crunch of boots. It was actually overwhelming after a night of silence. Claire cried a little without explaining why, and I didn't blame her. It's funny how you don't realize how much the world humans until it's taken away. We returned that evening with a new rule: stay outside as long as we could. But nightfall comes early in the hollers. By 6:30, we were back indoors. Fire roaring, not that we could hear it, and sitting around the table playing cards. That's when things turned. Evan dropped his deck and reached under the bench to grab it. His head knocked the underside of the table hard enough to sting, but his face twisted in confusion. Did you hear that? He mouthed. We hadn't, but he had. He knocked again, and this time he flinched at the sound, but none of us heard it. It was like the cabin was choosing what got absorbed and what didn't. Claire stood abruptly and started screaming. No sound came out. Her face contorted, tears spilling, throat vibrating, but the room stayed dead quiet. Theo and Megan grabbed her. Jeff shouted, but again, nothing. We were 6 people screaming into a soundless dome, our bodies vibrating with noise that never reached air. Claire ran outside. She didn't make it far before collapsing to her knees. We followed her out, confused, terrified. And that's when it hit. A wave, a physical wall of sound. All at once. Every missing whisper, every stomp, every pan clang, every fire crackle we'd lost in the cabin, it all came back. In a single moment. The air screamed. Our eardrums roared. Jeff fell backward and bled from one nostril. Claire's hands clamped over her ears. Shaking, Theo vomited. Megan stumbled to her knees, eyes wide with sheer animal panic. It was like the house had been storing it, holding it in. and when the seal broke, it hurt. Inside, the silence waited. We didn't go back in that night. None of us. We sat on the porch wrapped in jackets and emergency blankets, fire dying behind the thick glass door, watching the cabin in case it changed, shifted, did something. But it just sat there, perfectly still, still glowing faintly from the propane lamps we'd left on. I kept watching for any sound to flicker through the seams, a creak, a whisper, even wind passing through, but there was nothing. The silence was visible somehow, like the cabin was wrapped in wool. The sound didn't just stop inside. It couldn't leave. The next morning, Jeff insisted on going in alone. Said we couldn't just leave everything, phones, wallets, food. He opened the door. We watched. He stepped inside and vanished from hearing instantly. We could see him move, calling back to us, gesturing, but nothing reached. Then he stopped, slowly turned to look up at the loft. A beat passed. 2. He bolted back out, breath fogging, eyes wide. He couldn't talk at first. He was shaking too much. But finally he said, "Someone was standing up there." Of course. None of us had been inside since the night before. We should have left then. We talked about it, packed what we could, shoved gear into the trunk without a word. But Megan didn't want to leave without her camera. She'd left it in the downstairs room, and when Jeff refused to go back in, she volunteered, said she'd be quick, before any of us could argue. She was already through the door and soundlessly gone. We watched the windows. Time passed. 4 minutes. 6. Claire called her name uselessly. No echo, no response. Then we heard something from inside, not from the front door or the window, but from underneath. It was a low, grinding thrum, like wood being bent. Something structural. Theo moved closer, crouched, and put his ear to the ground near the porch beam. His face drained. "It's swallowing her," he whispered. We yanked the door open. The silence hit us like a wall. Claire held the door while I ran in with Theo, rushing past the dining table, into the hallway, then stopped. Megan was standing at the foot of the stairs, not looking at us, staring upward. We called to her, mouths dry, soundless. She didn't turn, just slowly backed away and pointed. There were footprints on the ceiling. They weren't human. Four-toed, spaced too far apart, arched wrong. The soot marks trailed from the top of the stairwell across the beams and into the shadows of the loft. Megan whispered something we couldn't hear. Her lips trembled, eyes glassy. I reached for her, but my hand passed through an air so dense it felt thick. I grabbed her arm and pulled. She didn't resist. Theo slammed the door behind us, and the sound returned in a scream, like standing inside a bell struck with a hammer. Our ears rang. I tasted blood. We didn't speak for a long time. Back at the truck, we threw what was left into the bed and drove without looking back. Jeff drove like a man possessed, tires crunching gravel as we descended toward any sign of civilization. Claire sobbed silently most of the way. Megan didn't speak. The only thing she said hours later, in the Waffle House we collapsed into, was this: "There's something under that cabin, and it doesn't like being heard." We called the rental company once we got signal. A woman answered and told us, very kindly, that there must be some mistake. The property listed under that code had burned down in 1997. She offered to send the documentation I still have the email. Photographs of charred beams, fire investigation notes, a map with a red X where we had been. That was the same porch, the same view, same layout. The cabin shouldn't have been there. I've searched satellite images since then. There's nothing in that clearing now. Just overgrowth, no drive path, no porch, not even foundation blocks. As if it wasn't just burned, it was removed, like it had never been allowed to stay still. But I remember it. We all do. And sometimes when I lie in bed too long in the quiet, I hear the echo of a door slamming in reverse like sound being sucked back inside something that was never meant to listen. I first saw it just past mile marker 9 on the Southern Fire Trail. An old lantern metal cage, sooty glass, the kind your grandfather might hang in a barn, resting against a tree trunk, like someone had set it there for a minute and forgotten. My name's Aaron Holcomb. I'm 42, and I've been with the Kentucky Division of Forestry for almost 15 years. Fire patrol, mostly. Seasonal trail inspections when the brush gets dry. Mingo's quiet country. Usually. Enough deer and rain to keep things simple. But this year, things hadn't been simple. There'd been 2 separate reports in the last week about phantom campfire smoke with no heat. Distant flickers that vanished when approached. Most times. It's kids or moonshiners. I went out solo, like always, checking perimeters. That's when I saw the lantern. Didn't glow, just sat there. I made a note of it in my log, snapped a picture with the department-issued phone, and moved on. But later, when I checked the gallery, the picture wasn't there, just a black square. The next day, I saw it again. Same lantern, this time, half buried in leaves about 30 feet off the path. Still not lit. I thought maybe a hunter had left it behind, and it got jostled down a hill. But something about the angle, how it faced directly toward me, no matter where I stood, made my stomach turn slightly. I reached for it. But as soon as my fingers touched the metal, the radio on my belt crackled with static. Not voices, just a single tone, like a long breath pressed through wire. I let go, and it stopped. That night, I drove my route home and found the lantern sitting on the hood of my truck. Lit, it glowed faint orange, barely enough to show the outline of the handle, but it was undeniably on. I stood there for a long minute before reaching forward. As soon as I did, the light went out, not dimmed, snuffed. The metal was cold. I searched the woods around me with my flashlight, but there was nothing. No trail, no prints, just me in the dark. I didn't tell the station. They already thought I was off lately, too tired, too quiet. But I know what I saw. Over the next week, it got worse. Every trail I walked, the lantern was there, always in a new spot, always facing me, sometimes on a stump, sometimes hanging from a branch that shouldn't support its weight. Once I found it inside the fire tower, right where I'd just walked minutes before. And every time I pointed it out to someone, other rangers, visiting biologists, it vanished, just gone. On day 7, I woke up in my truck, parked sideways at the edge of a fire break I didn't remember driving to. My boots were muddy, my shirt damp, but I hadn't left the vehicle, or so I thought. When I sat up, the lantern was hovering above me, not hanging, hovering, about 6 inches off my chest, lit from within, and beneath it, resting against the slope of my ribs, was a hand that wasn't mine. It held my radio. I froze, Couldn't breathe. Couldn't even blink. The fingers were too long. The skin was the wrong shade grayish, blotchy like wood left to rot. It gripped the radio and slowly rotated the dial. Static hissed to life. Then a voice, my own voice, whispered through the speaker. "Stop turning around." I slammed my fist upward. The lantern dropped. The hand was gone. I don't remember the drive back. The captain pulled me from rotation after that. Said I looked pale. Said I needed time. I agreed. Spent 3 days holed up in a hotel near Pikeville. Curtains drawn, radio unplugged. But I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the glow. Every shadow looked shaped like that lantern. Stubby, squat, familiar. On the 4th night, I tried to throw away my department phone, tossed it into a trash can outside the motel. It rang 20 minutes later from under my bed. I didn't answer the phone, just stared at it glowing under the bed, vibrating once every few seconds like it knew I was watching. My name showed on the caller ID Holcomb. And the time was wrong, 4:17 a.m. But my watch said 3:12. I left it there, packed a duffel, and drove out to a friend's cabin near Panther Creek where the reception was bad and the sky felt honest. I needed space, time, distance from whatever I'd brought back from those fire trails. But I was wrong about the distance. It didn't need roads to follow me. The first night was still. No phone, no radio, no connection. Just the hiss of wind and the pop of settling wood. I tried to sleep. Tried to tell myself it was exhaustion, trauma, a snapped wire in my brain. But sometime after midnight, the generator shut off on its own. No sputter, no warning. Just a hard, clean silence. I got up, walked outside with a flashlight. And there it was. The lantern, sitting on the porch rail, flame flickering low like it was trying not to wake me. I stepped back inside, locked the door. But the air felt too heavy, like someone else had been breathing in the room just before me. I checked every corner. Under the bed. Inside the shower. No one. But when I turned around, the lantern was on the table. Lit. My boots were damp. Tracking prints I hadn't made. My coat hung from a nail I hadn't touched. I should have run. Should have burned the place down and walked into the woods barefoot if I had to. But I stayed. Because I thought maybe if I understood it, it would stop. I set my own voice recorder on the table and turned it on. Spoke to the lantern like it was a thing that could hear me. "What are you? Why me?" No response. I let it run while I went outside, walked to the tree line and stared at the hills. When I came back, the lantern was gone. So was the recorder. I didn't find it again until 2 days later. Inside the fireproof locker at the ranger station, still recording, battery blinking red. Timestamp said it had been running for over 41 hours. I listened. My voice starts normal, asking questions. Then there's a long stretch of silence. At exactly 1 hour and 19 minutes in, there's a new sound. Breathing, not mine. Wet, uneven, like someone learning how. Then the clatter of metal, glass, and finally, a voice not mine speaking through static. I carried it long enough. Now it's yours. I left the station, didn't log out, drove south until the hills flattened and the sky looked wrong. I thought I could outpace it, but at a gas station near the state line, I caught a glimpse of myself in the window. Not the mirror, the window. And behind me, in the reflection, The lantern hung from a tree branch that didn't exist. It doesn't just appear anymore. It waits, stays out of reach. But I feel it. In my dreams. The light flickers across places I've never been. Hollow houses, dry creek beds, burned-out churches, and always, just at the edge, a shape holding it, not walking, not floating, just being there, like it's always been there, long before me. The department marked me unfit. They think I cracked from stress or exposure. But they never asked why I filed a final report that ends mid-sentence. Why every radio in my patrol zone now cycles to channel 4 by default. Why my name echoes on recordings that never ran. Because even when I try to forget it, turn off the lights, let the world go dim, it still glows through the dark. Flickering, waiting. And every time I hear static, I check to see if it's my voice or the hand that holds the radio now. They say the bell only rings at 10:17 a.m. Sharp, once, every day. My name's Morgan Pike, documentarian, audio engineer, and the kind of fool who chases rumors into the fog. I was 34 the fall we hiked up the slope near Clinch Mountain, hoping to catch something more than a story. My crew, Deja, Chris, and Malik, had been filming odd phenomena across Appalachia, ghost radio bursts, looped bird calls, a piano that kept playing Greensleeves in an abandoned resort. But this was different. This was rhythm, a structure. Every local we spoke to agreed the bell had never stopped ringing. The old schoolhouse burned down in 1949. Lightning strike. Kids got out. Mostly. But something about the foundation was never rebuilt, just left to moss and ash. We followed an old cart trail, overgrown but visible, and camped about 50 yards from the site. It was just ruins now, charred brick outlines, scorched nails, the suggestion of a bell tower. But you could feel the shape of it, like the space still remembered how to stand. We set up 2 cameras, 3 mics, and a parabolic dish aimed dead center. The first night, we heard nothing. Wind, owls, distant coyotes. But the clearing itself was unnaturally quiet. No insect drone, no leaf rustle, like nature was holding its breath. Deja swore she saw something move behind one of the standing chimney columns. But when we checked, there was only soot. At 10:17 the next morning, we sat in a circle. The air was cold, breath visible, and then it happened. A single bell strike, clean, sharp, too perfect. It didn't echo, not the way a sound should in the open. It just stopped after ringing, like it had been cut with a blade. We checked our equipment, every mic caught it, but only as a tonal spike. No reverberation, no ambient bleed, just 1 second of pure, inorganic tone. Chris analyzed the frequency, 987 hertz. Crystal clear. He looked disturbed, like he'd heard that tone before but couldn't place where. We stayed a second day, same routine, same strike, but this time, we caught something else. Laughter. Not from any of us. Not full laughter, either just a few notes. High and dry, like kids playing far off. We all turned at once. The sound had come from behind the moss-crawled ruins, near what had been the classroom wing. Deja went to investigate, camera rolling. She found a stack of old books, impossible, perfectly dry. No mold, as if placed there minutes ago. Arithmetic primers. 1 spelling guide. The inside cover was stamped with the name Sarah Dunley, Room B. When she opened the spelling book, Dust spilled upward like ash. The pages flipped themselves. Malik found the blackboard the next morning. It hadn't been there before. No structure remained that could have supported it. But now, in the center of the foundation square, a rectangular slab rested at an angle, made of moss, bark, ash, but shaped like slate, and written across it in sharp, childlike script were all our names. Morgan, Deja, Chris, Malik. Next to each was a mark. 3 check marks, 1 absent, mine. I checked my pulse. I was fine. Awake, present. But the doubt slid in anyway. Was this part of it? Had I left? Somehow I said nothing. I didn't tell them about the absent next to my name. Thought maybe it was a fluke, a prank even. Though that explanation wilted as soon as I saw how shaken Malik looked when he read his own. "They're in the order we signed the liability forms," he said quietly. "No way anyone else would know that." Deja took a photo. The image came out blurry, only the names visible. Not the board itself. Chris tried rubbing one of the check marks with his glove. Didn't smudge. It was part of the material, woven into the ash and moss like thread and cloth. We tried to keep filming. Told ourselves this was evidence. Gold, even something no other crew had ever caught. But the tension deepened. Deja's lav mic started picking up strange cross-channel interference. Not static, not wind. It was voices. Children. Maybe. Faint. Arrhythmic. No actual words. Just the cadence of playground sound. She took the mic off, switched to a boom. But even when it wasn't powered, it buzzed when pointed toward the ruins. That night, at 3:14 a.m., the bell rang again. Once. Sharp. Exactly like before. We all woke instantly. No one had set alarms. It shouldn't have rung everything we'd read. All reports. Said it happened once a day. Never outside 10:17. Chris started packing up equipment, muttering. We broke something. We triggered it. I wanted to argue. But he was right. This wasn't a passive echo anymore. It was listening back. The following morning, we found footprints around our tent site. Not ours. Barefoot, small, spaced in chaotic arcs, as if someone had been circling while we slept. But no soil was displaced, no leaves crushed, just faint impressions like someone had stepped through memory instead of earth. Malik sat down and wouldn't speak. Deja tried to calm him, but his eyes kept drifting to the ridge above the clearing, where the chimney silhouette stood like a crooked watchtower. Someone's watching from there, he said. Only when you don't look straight at it. Around noon, Chris vanished. We'd split up briefly to check cameras less than 5 minutes apart. His voice had come through the walkie minutes earlier. Normal. Then, nothing. No response. We found his camera propped on the stump, still recording. The screen showed 5 minutes of footage, pointed at the school ruins. And in the center of that frame, right before it cuts, you can see him walk into the shot. But he never walks out. The bell rings at 10:17 exactly, and he's just gone. We searched all day, looped the site, called in help. But by dusk, no one had come. The GPS kept trying to reroute us in circles. Even the sun seemed off, like it hovered too long in one place. We made the decision to stay one more night. We agreed not to sleep, to keep the lanterns burning, to record everything. But somehow, I still dozed. I woke alone. No Deja, no Malik, no sound. Just morning light spilling through canvas walls. My watch blinked 10:15 a.m. I ran from the tent, barefoot, scanning the clearing. No bags, no gear, just the moss board in the center. And this time, only one name was written. Morgan Pike, absent. And underneath, in darker strokes, present, Sarah D. The bell rang. I came out here for data, not folklore. My name's Dr. Elena Maris, botanist, research fellow at the University of North Georgia. 38 years old and, until this fall, not the type to spook easily. I'd been awarded a grant to study slope growth patterns in post-fire environments, specifically focusing on the ash trees in the southern highlands. The Rabun Gap Ridge had seen controlled burns 5 years prior, and I was setting up motion cameras and soil markers along a 2-mile stretch to document tree lean, root behavior, and canopy regrowth. But one tree wouldn't stay still. The first time I noticed it, I was marking slope angles near an exposed bluff. A massive ash, probably 90 years old, stood at the edge. Its trunk was warped but thick, splitting at the base before rising into a tight double helix that leaned, just barely, toward the east. I thought nothing of it. Trees lean, soil shifts. I marked it in my log tree hash, 47 ESE lean, approx 12 degrees. I took a photo and moved on. That night, back at base camp, I reviewed my notes and photos. Something about tree 47 caught my eye. In the photo, the lean was sharper, maybe 20 degrees. I told myself it was camera angle, distortion. I didn't sleep well. The wind that night had a strange timbre, like something brushing through teeth. Day 2, I returned with calipers and a plumb line. I measured again. The lean now registered 17 degrees, but in the opposite direction from the west. Trees don't pivot overnight. I checked my markers, assuming I'd misaligned the base. But all the flags were where I left them. More unsettling, the area around the trunk was undisturbed. No hoofprints, no shifted soil, just the ash tree, now slightly angled toward the trail where I stood. I laughed aloud, nervous. Talked to myself, it's nothing. Elena, you're tired. A rock shifted, a trick of shade. Still, I moved my tent 40 yards further downhill. That night, I woke twice. Once to a snapping sound, distant but sharp. The second time, just before dawn, to silence. The kind that presses. No insects, no breeze, just stillness. I stayed in my tent until full light broke through the mesh. When I stepped outside, the tree was 5 feet closer. It had moved. I documented everything, took measurements, photographed from multiple angles. The lean was now fully toward my tent, 22 degrees, a full twist of its split trunk, almost like it was craning. I paced a circle around it, trying to find mechanical damage or signs of tampering. But the ground was undisturbed. I dug briefly around the roots. They extended deep, old, healthy. This wasn't rot or collapse. Then I saw the carving, near the base, just above where the bark split. My initials had been etched EM. I hadn't carved them. No one else was out here. The lines were shallow but fresh, the inner bark not yet darkened. I touched them. The wood felt cold, not cool cold, like stone that had never seen sun. I backed away from the trunk, breath shallow, brain buzzing. There had to be a reason. Some hiker with a knife, a prank. But this was protected land, a permit-only access zone. No one else should have been near tree 47 or even known my name. I returned to camp and packed what I could. Not to leave, not yet, but to relocate farther down the slope. Still, I couldn't bring myself to move too far. Part of me needed to see what would happen next. That night, the wind never rose. The forest stood like it had forgotten how to move. I stayed up, headlamp off, watching from a rise near the fire road. The tree was there, silent and still in the dark, its double helix trunk faintly backlit by moonlight. Around 2:30 a.m., I turned my head for just a moment to write something in my journal, and when I looked back, the tree was leaning more. I hadn't heard it move, not even a rustle. But now, its crown tilted closer to where I stood, just enough to notice. I ran back to camp, heart pounding, left the rest of my gear behind, and slept in the truck, come morning. I returned with a tape measure, compass, and fresh resolve. The tree now stood less than 30 feet from the edge of my camp. The lean 27 degrees, still healthy, still impossibly moved. That's when I realized something else. Every photo I'd taken tree 47 had shifted just enough in each frame to face me. No matter my position, it had turned incrementally. Not much, just enough. The camera didn't lie. The trunk twisted over time. By midday, the bark began splitting. Not from disease. It wasn't cracking. It was peeling, thin flaps of outer bark, curling back to reveal knots beneath. Not natural knots, either. These were shapes, almost geometric. Sharp angles, like carving forms, but not quite symbols. The more I stared, the more they looked like a sequence. Some spiraled, others repeated. None of them matched any species growth pattern I'd ever seen. I thought about cutting a sample, just one, but my hand wouldn't raise the blade. That afternoon, I heard my own voice in the woods. Just a word. Elena, carried not on wind, but as if it had already passed my ear and I was only catching the memory. I whipped around no one, only forest. The tree stood closer again, no longer subtle. Its roots had surfaced slightly, like it had been dragging forward. I grabbed my gear, loaded the truck. But I hesitated. Something in me still wanted to stay, to witness it through. I left a trail camera aimed directly at tree 47, set to motion detect. 2 hours later, already halfway down the highway, I felt my pocket buzz. The app had triggered. I pulled over at a rest stop and opened the live view. The tree was gone. Only open ground in the frame. No broken limbs, no shifted dirt, just empty hillside. Then, after 10 seconds of stillness, the camera feed flickered and the tree appeared. Same spot, same lean, as if it had never moved. 2 weeks later, the footage was wiped. Corrupted. They said, SD card unusable. But I know what I saw, and what I saw was watching me. I never returned to Robin Gap, not alone, but last month. A student sent me a photo from a different slope. 20 miles east, a warped ash tree, double helix trunk, bark markings just beginning to surface. They asked if I'd ever seen anything like it. I told them to leave. I told them to never turn their back on it. Because when the lean starts, it always finishes. We didn't plan to be on the water that day. My name's Seth Alder, 31, and I've been kayaking rivers across West Virginia since I was 17. My buddy Jason and I had driven out to Gawley for what we thought would be a clean weekend run, calm before the heavy rains. But the fog rolled in early, thick as cotton. By the time we reached the first bend, we couldn't see 10 feet ahead. Not water, not shore, not even each other's paddles. We should have turned back, but something about the air dense, too still, made it feel like we were paddling into a sealed room. The first sound came at the halfway marker. Rushing water. Not unusual, this stretch runs close to a narrow fall. But the noise was wrong. It didn't echo. It clattered. Sharp and shallow, like it was striking something just ahead. We paddled harder, thinking maybe the fog would lift if we got past it. Instead, the light dimmed further. Not darker, just distorted, like sun coming through a bottle. Jace called out. His voice sounded far off, like he'd shouted from underwater. That's when he vanished from view. I spun my kayak to follow, the noise growing louder. I could barely see the outline of his back ahead. His strokes urgent. Then something shattered. Not a rock, not a fall. The air broke. A crack rang out like a dropped window pane, and shards of fog fell around me in slow, glittering slivers. I watched one graze my sleeve. It left no wetness, but a fine cut in the fabric. The mist split down the center, like a curtain torn open. And in that moment, I saw both kayaks, mine and another, crushed flat, bobbing in place. I froze. Jace circled back, eyes wide. We both stared at it, same model, same scratches, same gear tied to the stern. But the seat was mangled inward, warped like something had stepped into it. He reached toward it. I screamed not to. He hesitated just long enough for the fog to close back over. The broken kayak vanished, gone, as if folded into the river's skin. We paddled to shore, no trail, no wind, just the smell of static and cold stone. I checked my GPS. It said we were north of the gully, but the map was blank, unrendered. Jace's phone wouldn't even power on. The battery had drained to 0. Mine flickered, then buzzed hard. A new notification, reverse course. It wasn't from any app I recognized. We camped on a rocky patch, shivering until dawn. The fog thinned by morning, but only barely. When we pushed off again, the river felt too slow, like it had thickened. Hours passed. We saw no other boats, no sound of birds or insects, just the hollow splash of our own paddles. Then the fog broke again. This time, we saw the third kayak. It was upside down, caught on a gravel bar like it had been dragged and dropped. Pale green hull, same make as ours, but neither of us owned that color. Jace pulled us close despite everything in me saying no. The fog here had texture now, wisps folding against our skin like breath held too long. We braced, flipped it carefully, and what we found inside wasn't water or gear. It was our names, scratched into the inner hull. Not printed, not etched with a knife. Scratched, jagged letters, like something with hard nails had carved them in one swipe. Seth, Jace. Side by side, no last names, no blood. But the marks were fresh, no moss, no wear. And beneath them, curled under the footrest, was a feather, long, charcoal black, bone-thin spine. It wasn't a local bird. We'd both spent enough time in these woods to know that. The fog pulsed. I don't know how else to say it. It pulsed, like something breathing around us. Jace threw the feather into the water, and the surface didn't move. It didn't ripple. The feather just sat there, perfectly still, like it had landed on glass. I touched the water with my paddle, and the resistance was wrong. Too thick. No give. Then the sound came again, not the cracking. The hiss. A high, dry hiss, like steam in a metal pipe. But it circled us. We backed off the gravel bar fast. I pushed hard, heart-punching ribs, and didn't look back until we hit a split in the river we didn't recognize. No map showed this fork. No landmarks matched. Jace held up his phone, black screen. No power. I checked mine. Still glowing. But the time read, and the only thing on screen was a flashing icon I'd never seen. A cracked circle. 3 lines spiraling inward. Then it went dark too. We argued. Jace said we should follow the current. I said there wasn't a current. He was right. And I was right. Because we weren't moving anymore. The fog made it impossible to tell. But our boats were motionless, like the water held us in place, waiting. We started paddling again. Hard, arms burning. Still nothing. Then, after what felt like an hour, the fog cleared just long enough to show the canyon wall painted with symbols. Huge, jagged, dark like soot. Hundreds of them. And one stood out. A perfect match to the icon on my phone. A crack split the air behind us. This time, it sounded like the sky itself had torn. The fog fractured again, and I saw my own kayak. Me in it, or something wearing me. Blank-eyed, still, holding the same paddle in the same grip, but motionless, frozen like a wax figure. Jace didn't see it. He was pointing at the far shore, shouting something I couldn't hear. I blinked once. The image was gone. My arms were shaking. The river suddenly rushed beneath us, no transition. Just a drop and surge. Like being dropped into motion again after standing still too long. We made it to a ranger station near dusk. They told us we were 2 days late. I showed them the phone. It wouldn't turn on. Jace's gear was waterlogged, even though he'd sealed everything. One of the kayaks had warped nose, crushed inward like a boot had stomped it. We left everything behind. Never filed a formal report. But sometimes, I hear that crack. Just after waking, just before sleep, and I think about the moment the fog breaks again. I only meant to be out a few hours. Just a photo hike, low clouds, amber leaves, the kind of fog that softens the light just right. My name's Riley Cho. 36 freelance photographer and occasional solitude junkie. I was spending a week in Davis, renting a little A-frame to detox from the noise of deadlines and noise of people. I'd been through Blackwater Falls plenty, but that morning I turned down a wooden walkway I didn't remember. No signs, no markings, just a perfect, narrow path lined with hand-hewn rails, slick with morning dew. The wood looked new. Too new. At first, I figured it was a back trail, something the Park Service had quietly renovated. It led downward, gently curving, lined with smooth stones and copper-colored ferns I hadn't seen anywhere else in the area. I took photos, every 30 feet or so. I stopped and snapped wide-angle shots. The light was oddly steady. No shifts through trees, no dark patches, just a constant, ambient glow, like walking through filtered glass. When I checked the viewfinder, the shots were gorgeous. Framed perfectly, except for one thing. The path wasn't in them. Every frame showed trees, foliage, shadows. But the wooden planks beneath my feet didn't show up. The railings vanished. Even my boots appeared to hover over damp leaves. I stopped, backed up, took a burst of frames with my phone instead. Same thing. The entire walkway was missing. I crouched down and ran my hand over the wood, half expecting it to pass through like fog, but it was solid. Wet, real. I knocked it with the heel of my camera bag. The sound rang out, but when I listened back on my field recorder, there was only silence. I should have turned back. I told myself I would, right after the next curve. But the trail just kept gently drawing me forward, like walking through a thought I hadn't finished yet. I passed a faded trail map nailed to a tree, no label. No "You're here" dot. Just a pale outline with a single phrase at the bottom. It's path in use. That's when I noticed the second oddity. There were no other sounds, not even my own. The bird song I'd heard earlier was gone. My footsteps were muted, like walking on carpet. I spoke aloud just to test it, but the words hung strangely in my chest. Not quiet, just unanswered. Then came the alert. My phone vibrated once in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting low battery or poor signal. But it was a notification banner across the top. Continue wrote. Below it, a single route name. Waited too long. I tapped the screen. Nothing happened. The notification stayed there, frozen. No way to swipe it away. Waited too long. I stood still for a moment, listening to my own breath, hearing nothing around it. The trail ahead curved out of sight. The same perfect wood, slick and clean. I took one cautious step forward. My phone buzzed again. Same alert. The path didn't look different, but it felt heavier somehow, like the air was pressing me towards something it wasn't ready to show. I turned to head back and froze. There was no trail behind me. The walkway I'd just walked now ended in a curtain of ferns and wet stone, like it had never been there at all. No plank boards, no railings, just forest. I spun, heart racing, and took a few quick photos behind me. The camera glitched, all black frames, like the lens had been shut. The fog was thickening too, curling in from the tree line, staying low, hugging the ground like it had weight. I walked forward again, faster now, watching for anything familiar every few feet. The landscape almost repeated itself, same crooked birch, same twisted fern, but always just slightly off. Too much moss. A branch broken where it hadn't been. Then I came to a wooden signpost. No words, just a carved arrow pointing downward. Underneath it, a brass plate bolted crookedly into the wood, remaining 0.4 miles. I didn't remember seeing a start point. I hadn't walked any known mileage. And yet, here I was, tracked. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was different. A new notification, no app name, just a message. Do not stop, do not sit. I didn't. I kept moving. But the world around me slowed. Not visually. Everything remained the same, but my thoughts began to drag. I found myself blinking slower, forgetting what time it was. I reached for my water bottle, and it wasn't there. Checked my watch blank screen. I touched the side of my camera bag and felt cold condensation where it should have been dry. Something was stealing time in inches. I passed a mirror, not a real one, just a sheet of metal, bolted between two trees like a trail marker. It reflected me, but not me now. Me from earlier. Backpack on both shoulders. Hat still on. My face, smiling faintly. That wasn't right. I hadn't smiled all day. I touched the surface, cold, dry, no reflection moved. And then I heard my name. Not loud, not whispered, just spoken, firm, familiar, my own voice. I turned and saw nothing. But now, my feet were wet. I'd stepped into something shallow and clear. Looking down, I saw the trail submerged under still water. Only an inch deep, but my boots had left no ripples. The water was still. There were footprints, though not mine. Small, bare, leading ahead. I followed. I had no choice. The final stretch came suddenly. A clearing. An empty wooden bench, damp and warped, resting under a bent tree that looked far older than the rest of the forest. Behind it, the path ended at a sheer drop, a rocky outcrop overlooking nothing but mist. As I stepped forward, my phone buzzed one last time. No message, just a screen that pulsed faintly with a blue light. A final prompt appeared. Arrived. Would you like to go back? I pressed yes. The screen turned black. When I opened my eyes, I was standing outside the visitor center, camera bag soaked, boots muddy, and no one around. I checked the gallery. Every photo I'd taken on that trail was missing. But my phone kept flashing a background notification, even though I'd closed all apps. It read route, paused, resuming when ready. It was our second night on the ridge, and we weren't even that far from base. Just a weekend trip, me, Naomi, and Derek, 3 friends with too much gear and not enough sense. I'm Tommy Wren, 29 nurse by profession, but wilderness junkie at heart. The Alleghenies are full of quiet corners if you know where to look. And we'd pitched camp on a flat shelf above a dry creek bed. Clear night, soft wind. No animals, no threat. Until Derek went out to relieve himself and came back white as chalk, whispering. There's another tent. At first, we laughed. Thought maybe someone had set up nearby without us noticing. But Derek shook his head. It's our tent. We followed him just 10 feet from where we'd built our fire. Near a thicket of fern and moss. The ground was torn slightly, like a dog had been digging. And there it was, the corner of a green nylon tent. Identical make. Same brand. Same patched seam on the rain fly. But buried. Half covered in dirt and leaves like the woods had been trying to hide it. We cleared it with our hands. Too shocked to stop. The zipper was closed, but not locked. Derek opened it first. Inside 3 sleeping bags, all unrolled. 3 backpacks, arranged just like ours. And in the mesh pocket on the wall, a Polaroid photograph. Us. Sleeping. That very morning. Same positions, same blankets. Naomi's foot sticking out just like it had been. But none of us remembered taking it, and the camera we'd brought, mine, was still zipped in my pack. There was more. The packs inside weren't just similar. They were ours. Naomi found her necklace in the side pouch. Derek pulled out a granola wrapper with the date from yesterday. He'd eaten it in the car on the way up. My journal, leather-bound and private, lay on the floor. I flipped through the first page. It started the same. Same words. But midway through, the entries changed. Tomorrow's date was already filled in. It described Naomi twisting her ankle near the creek. It mentioned rain that hadn't come yet. And the last sentence chilled me deeper than the cold wind creeping in. Don't dig this up. None of us spoke for a long time. We just stood there, staring at the journal like it might start writing itself in front of us. Naomi tried to laugh it off. but her voice came out too sharp, too thin. "It's a prank," she said. "Has to be." But even she didn't believe that. We knew our own gear, our own handwriting. The folds in the sleeping bags, the way Derek laced his boots, it was all too exact. Like someone had mirrored us in perfect detail, then buried the copy under just enough dirt to keep it secret. We covered it again. That was Naomi's idea. She said if we pretended we hadn't seen it, maybe it would stay that way, just a glitch in the woods. A moment we could forget. We didn't talk much the rest of the night. Slept in shifts, ears perked at every rustle. I kept the journal from the buried tent in my own pack. Even though every instinct screamed to leave it behind, I needed proof. Something to hold when I started questioning if it had all happened. But when I checked it in the morning, the last page was gone. Torn clean. No trace of the "don't dig this up" line. Just blank parchment where words had once been. That's when Naomi twisted her ankle. Exactly like the journal said. We hadn't even started breaking camp yet. She stepped wrong on a root near the creek, landed hard, swelled fast, too fast. We wrapped it and argued over options. Stay another night or try the hike out slow. But as we talked, clouds began to gather. Not a front we'd seen in the forecast. They came low and thick, like smoke from a smothered fire. I reached for my phone to check the radar. No signal, no power. The battery was full last night. Back at the fire ring, our tent was sagging. The poles hadn't snapped, but the fabric looked slumped, like it had been sitting there for weeks. Damp, faded. The color wasn't right anymore. Less green, more gray. I unzipped it, heart pounding. Inside, our gear was soaked. Not from rain, from the ground up. The sleeping bags were cold, heavy with moisture. Derek touched one and pulled his hand back. His palm was stained faintly with dirt, not surface dust soil. We heard movement in the woods just after noon. Not animals. Footsteps. 2 even. 1 pair, then 2, then 3. Each with a different rhythm, like someone trying to match our stride, but getting it wrong. We packed as fast as we could, left half our stuff behind. Naomi limped, supported by both of us, and we took a longer, switchback trail we thought would keep us out of the hollows. But every turn brought us back within sight of our fire ring. The buried tent, the fading nylon. The last time, we didn't even recognize the trail. The trees were too dense, the slope wrong. But there it was, again our own sight, our own mistake repeating. The sky had darkened, distant thunder, but no rain. I opened my pack again. The journal had returned to its last page. New handwriting, not mine. The entry read, 1 left. The others turned back. I didn't show the others. We waited until dark, then tried again. This time, Derek led. Silent, focused. I don't remember how we got out. Just that we did. Suddenly, the trailhead appeared. The ranger station lights were on. Naomi's leg had stopped bleeding, but she still couldn't walk without help. We collapsed on the porch, shivering. When the rangers asked where we'd been, we told them Cedar Loop, though that wasn't true. We hadn't been on any marked trail for over 24 hours. One ranger frowned. That area's been closed since July. Fire damage. No tent sites at all. I asked if they'd ever found abandoned gear up there. He paused. Once, he said. 3 packs, rotted through. Tent buried under a rock slide. No sign of campers. That was back in '09. We didn't go back. But last week, A package arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside a single Polaroid. Us sleeping in the tent. But the timestamp. Next week's date.